There's this story in a book I was reading not that long ago. The book was called The Last Battle. If you're aware of the Chronicles of Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, it's one of the books. It's the last book in that series. If you're not aware of that series, that doesn't matter. So the book's called The Last Battle, and funnily enough, there's this big battle that takes place for a big part of the book. And the battle takes place in the middle of the night, in the dark, on the top of this hill in front of a little stable. And through the course of the battle, most of the characters they pass through the door of the stable. Some of them are thrown in there by their enemies, some of them go in there to run away, some of them dive in there, dragging their enemies with them. But most of them find themselves going through the door one way or another. Now, the main characters of the story, or the series, are a group of children called the Friends of Narnia. And when they've gone through the door of the stable, they find themselves then in this beautiful world all around them. There's the sun shining on their faces from a sky that's like more blue than they've ever seen. The grass under their feet is softer and greener than any grass they've ever seen and felt before. The air in their face is fresh and cool. And they even see there's some fruit trees nearby, and this fruit looks so good that they don't even want to pick it. But they pick it and taste it, and the book actually says that they can't describe what it tastes like. It was that good. So there's all this beauty and goodness that they're drinking in from the world that they've found themselves in. But there's another group of characters who are a bunch of dwarves who have also, in the course of the battle, gone through the door of the stable. And the children see this group of dwarves in the same place that they are, but instead of drinking in all the beauty that's around them, they're sitting in a little group on the ground, just all huddled down, facing each other in a group. And when the children go to them and try and talk to them, try and see what's going on with them, it becomes clear that the dwarves can't see any of this beauty that's around them. They can't see the blue shining sky. They can't see the soft grass. They can't see the trees with the beautiful fruits. They think that they're in the pitch black of a smelly, dirty, cramped stable. Their eyes are closed and they can't see any of what's around them that children can see. Now, in today's gospel, Jesus talks about the sending of the Holy Spirit. He promises the Holy Spirit to us. The Holy Spirit, which is the very love of God who lives within us and brings life to our whole Christian experience. And he speaks of the Spirit in these verses as the Spirit of truth. It's very right that we can speak of the Holy Spirit as a Spirit of truth because he opens our eyes to see the reality of what's around us, to see the truth of things. And just like in this scene, in this story, where the group of children can see and can enjoy all the beauty of the scene that they found themselves in, the beauty of the sun and the grass. They can taste the beauty of the fruits, how delicious they are. But the dwarves can't see any of this. They're blinded to the reality of what's around them because they're convinced that they're in this dark, dingy stable. So they're sitting clumped together in fear. And it's just quite the same in our own world, that there's so much beauty and goodness around us that really the world is full of the presence of God, full of the goodness of the Lord. He's created the world filled with his own beauty, and we can see that in nature and that sort of thing. And this is something that the Spirit does when it comes into our hearts. It opens up our eyes to see the truth of all of this, to recognize the beauty and the goodness of the world that's around us. And we also see that a difference between the experience of the children and the dwarves is that the group of children are experiencing all of this and delighting in it together. They're rejoicing with one another. And even when they see the dwarves in their plight, in their not being able to enjoy any of this, they try and help them to see and open up their eyes. And the Spirit also reveals to us the beauty and the presence of God in the person next to us, whether that's the person who we know intimately or we live with, or a stranger down the road, the Spirit of God can reveal to us the truth that they are a beloved of God and that they are our brother and sister, and the Spirit can inspire us to actually love them and treat them in that way. But the experience of the dwarves, on the other hand, was that even though they're all in this darkness, in this blindness together, they just bicker and fight with each other still. So they're not open to see even the goodness of their brothers who they're sharing in this experience with. Now, I was drawn to this story because of this sharp distinction that we see between the experience of the children and the experience of the dwarves. And in what Jesus is saying to us today, there's this sharp distinction he makes between the world who cannot receive the Spirit and the world who cannot receive the Spirit, and his disciples who he's talking to who already know the Spirit. He says, I will send you the Spirit of truth, whom the world can never receive, since it neither sees nor knows him. But you know him because he is with you and he is in you. So there's this radical distinction between seeing and knowing the Spirit and not being able to. And just before I go any further, it can seem like Jesus is saying that some of us can receive the Spirit, and we're Jesus' favorites, so he offers us the Spirit, and we can enjoy all that God's giving us in that way, and we can have our eyes opened and see the goodness. And there are others who don't get the Spirit, who are closed off to it, that God doesn't offer the Spirit to. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. That's not what I'm trying to say as well. In fact, Jesus offers the Spirit to all of us. That's the promise that he's making in these verses and that he makes again and again in the Gospels. But the world that he says cannot receive the Spirit, since it neither sees nor knows him, that's only when we refuse the gift that Jesus offers us, when we refuse to let God come into our lives and come into our hearts, when we refuse to let the Spirit open up our eyes to see the beauty and the goodness that's around us and to see God. So, if perhaps you're listening to this and you're thinking that, I don't really know this experience of the Spirit that you're talking about, or perhaps you do, any of us though, whoever you are, whatever position you're in listening to this, we can all be filled with the Spirit more, and Jesus in fact wants to bring the Spirit to us and to let him do this revealing work in us. So let's be open to however the Spirit wants to reveal that to us. But in fact, the most important revealing of truth that the Spirit does within us is to reveal Jesus to us. In this story, it's seen that the children encounter Aslan, who's the great lion. And in fact, through the whole series, he is the image of Christ in this world and in this story. They encounter him, and it's a beautiful scene. Whereas the dwarves, who are closed off to God, closed off to seeing the beauty and the goodness, they don't even see that he's there. And he extends kindness to them and tries to offer them gifts, but they can't even receive that. They're so closed off. And so just the same, if we look in our own world, what does the world say about Jesus? That the world can say to us that, yeah, Jesus was a nice guy and he lived 2,000 years ago. We'll give you that. Maybe even some of the things he said were all right. And this is kind of what Jesus is talking about when he says, in a short time the world will no longer see me. Like, yeah, he's died and risen and then he's ascended to the Father. He's not physically in front of us, standing in front of us like a man. We can't see Jesus in that way. And therefore, unless we have the Spirit, it can seem like he's just a historical figure. But by the Spirit of truth, we can know Jesus, and we can know that he lives, and that in him we live. And this is the most important truth that the Spirit can reveal to us, not separate from these other things that the Spirit reveals, that the beauty of the world around us, or the beauty of our brothers and sisters and the presence of God in them, but that to know Jesus and the truth of who he is to us is the foundation of all of this revelation. Now, on Friday, I was blessed to partake in a funeral of a friend from Melbourne. I live streamed into the Mass, and as part of the Mass, they were able to show this video that Mark had been able to record a testimony on video of her experience of the Spirit transforming her life. So we were able to watch that with the funeral and remember that. And she recalled how some years ago she'd been drawn into a relationship with some people who were encouraging her to open up to God, particularly one woman who had been shared her own experience of opening up to God, and she offered to pray for Marg. So she'd come around to her house and she prayed with her that the Spirit would come forth in her life. And then the woman had to leave, so she went. And Marg went back to doing the things that she did around the house. But she was washing the dishes, and she felt this prompting that I need to go into my bedroom and kneel down by my bed. And this prompting was just leading her, I need to go into my bedroom and kneel down by my bed. And she resisted it at first, but then she threw down the dishcloth and she went into her bedroom, followed this prompting. And as she knelt down by the bed, she described being filled, she says, from the bottom of her being all through her body, and her eyes were opened to see. Soon after, her youngest son, who was only a few years old, came into the room, and she could see the presence of God in him. She went outside, and there were these hills and trees around where they lived, and she could see the presence of God there. She likened this experience to the blind man in the Gospels who encountered Jesus and his eyes were opened. It was like she was blind and now she could see. But the most transformative part of what God did in her life at this moment was that she knew Jesus, and she knew just how much he loved her, and that she could live her life for her. And this was what she was able to give her life for so many years since, trying to help other people to open up to this encounter, to see who Jesus was, to know him and to know his love for them, that he would die for them, and that they could also live for him. So today Jesus promises us this same Spirit of truth to come into our hearts. In fact, he says that he's already in us and he's wanting to do this revealing work. So let's open ourselves up to this revealing of the Spirit of truth, that we may see and that we may know the beauty of the world around us, that we may see and know the beauty of our brothers and sisters and the presence of God in them, that we may see and know who God is and how great his love is for us.